Thanks, Lincoln. Thanks, everybody. Always like to do a bit of research first up. Who's heard of the Australia Institute? Oh, that's pretty good. How about you guys in the queue? Who's heard? Hey, guys in the queue, you're queuing up for free food. So let's have a little bit of participation. Who's heard of Woodside? Hands up if you've heard of Woodside in the queue. All right, a few. Of people who've heard of Woodside, you guys can participate in this too. Who thinks Woodside is good? Put your hand up. That's good. Who thinks Woodside is bad? Put your hand up. In the queue, your food depends on this. You've got to get this right. Do you think Woodside is bad? Put your hand up. No food for any of those people. And if you thought that Woodside was bad, can we just have a little bit of an assessment of, did you think they were kind of bad like Collingwood supporters, bad like Tony Abbott, or bad like Satan? How about sort of the Collingwood supporter level bad? No? Tony Abbott? Satan. Oh, well, that's going to make this talk even easier than I thought, because it's really my job to convince the people in the queue that Woodside are as bad or worse than Satan. So where to start? Firstly, thanks to Stop Woodside Monash for having me here today at this festival. I'd kind of prefer to be speaking at a protest, but a Woodside festival is the next best thing. And of course, we're speaking at a festival because of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Because of genocide, we can't have a protest, we have to have a festival. And that shows you, and this is relevant because we have genocide because we have institutions that don't uphold their integrity and don't use their power for the right things. And we have genocide for the same reason that we have climate change. Institutions are not using their power and backing up their integrity. And that's why Monash has a building called the Woodside Building. Boo. So you've heard a lot about how Woodside is causing more climate change, and that's bad. They're damaging the Murujuga priceless cultural heritage art region. That's really bad. But they're even worse. They're definitely further down the Satan end than you might think. Who's heard of the bugging of the East Timorese delegation over the Timor Gap oil issue? A few people. How about in the queue? Nice one. That guy gets an extra spring roll. During the Howard government era, Australia's spy agency, ASIS, illegally bugged the meeting rooms of the East Timorese government in order to understand what the East Timorese government was going to say in negotiations over oil. And who did they do this for? For Woodside. Boo. And who was the foreign minister who oversaw the bugging of East Timorese government for Woodside? It was Alexander Downer. And who did Alexander Downer go and work for after he left government? Woodside. So Woodside is involved in the absolute corruption of the Australian government and Australia's spy agencies against the interests of the poorest country in Southeast Asia and one of Australia's nearest neighbours and a country that we owe many different kinds of debt towards. That is the kind of company that the building over there bears the name of. A few years after that, a few years later, Woodside commissioned the CSIRO to conduct some research on whether or not Woodside's gas was actually displacing coal in power stations in Asia. This is a claim that Woodside likes to make, to say that actually they're good for the climate because their gas is displacing big, bad, dirty coal. And do you know what CSIRO found? They found it was bullshit. And what did did Woodside say, oh, well, fair cop, we better publish that research and come up with some different lines? No, they tried to cover it up. They tried to stifle Australia's premier scientific agency from talking about research that Woodside had commissioned. That is the kind of company that your building over there is named after. More recently, we've seen Woodside working with the West Australian government and Western Australian police and security agencies to spy on students and protesters just like you. And do you know where the former Western Australian Treasurer went to work after he left the West Australian government? He went to the Woodside board. I mean, that's Labor's Ben Wyatt. He's not alone. The former Liberal National Resources Minister, Ian McFarland, guess which board he's on? The Woodside board. Woodside is at the heart of corrupting institutions in Australia. The Australian government, the CSIRO, Australia's security agencies, they have been undermining the integrity of these organisations for decades. And right now, they are undermining the integrity of Monash University in order to use your institution's name, your institution's power to greenwash their practices and to further their own interests. So I absolutely welcome you all here today to expressing your concern about Woodside and Monash's role with Woodside, because Monash, using its power, demonstrating its integrity as an Australian institution, can make a difference. It will make a difference. Imagine if all of these institutions that we've talked about, that I've talked about just now, of CSIRO, of ASIS, the Australian government, the West Australian government, of different political parties, imagine if those institutions had stood up and said, we are not going to sell out to Woodside, we are going to uphold the public interest. Australia would be in a much better place today. So hats off to you all. Get involved in the processes around the ESG statement and the calls for the renaming of the Woodside building. If Monash gets up and makes a stand, the rest of Australia will follow. Thanks very much.